Question right there.
I'm so fascinated by the fact that you've worked with federal entities on these issues. Could you give us some reflection about where the hopeful ways might be to help penetrate the pseudoscientific approaches of the federal government? I give the example of the fact that FDA still allows homeopathy. We've got some strange new light device that's now been FDA approved. We've got, that's the agency I come from. We're using the polygraph right and left, and a lot of these other things is very dubious science. How can we help the federal government to think more rationally about these?
So the question, what's the best approach to change the government's support, diminish the government's support of the pseudoscience and the paranormal?
I'm not sure how to do that, because the government agencies is this big bureaucracy with all kinds of little pockets in it. And what I found was that there are pockets that do all kinds of weird stuff, but the other pockets don't know about it. And there are also real good skeptics in the area as well. The military, the CIA, I know, and some of the other agencies that I have had some direct contact with. And what you have is that one side doesn't know what the other side's doing. One of the things I found was that if I could get access, and if they had a centralized database where I could check how many parapsychological things are going on, there's no way I could find out. And I don't think the President of the United States, anyone could find out, because what I find was that many of the people doing weird stuff, parapsychological work and stuff like that, like in the Navy, I found that you only find these by accident. A lot of things that are called parapsychological work go under different names. They use code names for them. They put perception under unusual conditions. Well, that fits a lot of things, underwater and submarines, up and out of space and stuff like that. But a lot of the people doing oddball ESP experiments and other stuff will use that to cover up what they're doing. So and this John Alexander when I was on the committee on Techniques for Enhancing Human Performance, which was basically the Army Research Institute put up this money to have the National Academy of Sciences look into borderline techniques such as neurolinguistic programming, meditation, sleep learning, and parapsychology. Many vendors are selling techniques to various branches of the military based on these things. So we were asked to look at see if there's any one of these things that have any possibility of being good, that the government was currently then using, including, using these recordings, subliminal persuasion, and so on. And most of the people, even in the agencies where this was going on, didn't know that it was going on, People, this John Alexander, Colonel Alexander, was running a military ordnance research at Fort Meade, I think it was. And he was sponsoring the research of Cleve Baxter. Baxter was the guy in the 1960s, was the first guy to attach electrodes to a philodendron plant and showed that it responded to, psychically, to people, to brine shrimp being burned in another room or something like that. And that started the talking to plants movement and stuff like that. Well, Baxter's still around. He's still doing research like that. And John Alexander, Colonel Alexander, when he was running the ordnance laboratory, was funding his work. Now, how did he get away with that? This is guns he's supposed to be dealing with, right? He got away with it because he told us ourselves, our committee, he said, look, if I spend anything over $10,000, I've got to document everything, to support some research. But if I spend anything up to $10,000, I don't have to say anything about it. So he was giving this guy $10,000 a day, each one's a separate contract. So he didn't have to report it.
So no real clear roadmap on how to diminish the government's support itself for pseudoscience?
Well, what it amounts to is the government is just a microcosm of the rest of society. It's the same thing. Some parts don't know what the other part's doing, and people, there are rogues that are all around, and it may be good or bad because there are whole areas in the CIA and Defense Department, something where people go off and do their own thing, and the rest of the people don't know about it. Even the head of the CIA doesn't know about it. It's just amazing. It's just such a big bureaucracy, but also all these little pockets of people doing some strange things. And I'd like to believe that they still are a minority, but I'm not so sure. But because the head of when I was there, our committee was formed in 1985. The then retired head of INSCOM, Army Intelligence, Albert Stubblebine III, who Tammy over here confirms for me. She knew Stubblebine. They were good friends, obviously, right? No, but she knew Stubblebine. He's the brother of Lee Marvin. He looks like him, too. So Lee Marvin's name must have been Stubblebine, too, I guess, before he changed it to Marvin.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question. Anyone? Right over here.
You've spent a lot of time in academia, and I understand that getting grant money is very, very difficult. How is it that even with really nothing to show for it over many, many years, that there are still departments of parapsychology, there's still money being awarded to research in parapsychology?
The money not coming.
I'll paraphrase the question for the listeners. So why does parapsychology still get funding when there's been no evidence to support it over the years?
Parapsychology gets practically no funding, government funding. And what little it got, by the way, a big deal was made out of the fact that the 20-year research in Stargate, on remote viewing, got $7 million. That's a pittance of the military budget. But actually, the only reason that number, $7 million, comes around is because they got it from me. I was trying to find out how much was being spent only in one laboratory in California on the research they were doing, being supported by first the CIA, but then it was a national, intelligence, the national...
NSA, yeah.
No, it's another one. Okay, but anyways, Defense Intelligence Agency. I'm sorry, Defense Intelligence Agency was. What happened was the CIA had, for the first 5 years or so of the remote viewing, they had been supporting it, but then decided it was going nowhere, so they dropped it. But then the Defense Intelligence Agency took it over, and they were supporting it. So for 20 years, this program was going on, and no one knew how much money was being spent on it. But I just tried to find out on one laboratory how much they'd gotten, and he told me over 5 years they got $7 million of funding.
That one lab.
That one lab. So I happened to mention that, and that became the word all over. Now it becomes, once you say something like that, that becomes it. And so I unfortunately was the inadvertent. Wow. So Larry King Live, when he had me on, he said, how can the government waste $7 million of money? And $7 million is a pittance, right? For the terms of, but so the people who were incensed about this kept emphasizing that the $7 million wasted. And the people on the other side who didn't want to interview me, they interviewed instead Jessica Utzer. She was the other part of the team, and she's the parapsychologist part of the team. If they wanted a program where they wanted to emphasize, look, the government's doing this wonderful stuff with psychic remote viewing, how open, and we got a great government, they would interview her. If they wanted emphasize the negative, they would interview me. But during that interview, they always brought up the $7 million. How our government was wasting $7 million of your precious tax dollars.
Ray, last question, and it's really kind of a follow-up on that, and then we'll finish up. After 50 years of looking into this stuff, do you think the questions are still worth asking? Is the research still worth doing? So even if it's not government funded, is it still worth looking into all this stuff?
For my part, no. But if people want to do it, I say, okay, if they're going to do it, I hope they do it in the best way possible.
Thank you very much for the conversation, Ray Hyman.